So I'm Helen McCarthy. I am one of the directors of the INA, and I was asked to host this meeting. Tati should have hosted it, but unfortunately she's not. She's got other things that she's had to do, so I've jumped on board. So I will hand over.
Awesome, wonderful. Well, I just want to take a moment and say thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. I'll go through my bio a little bit here, and I had originally sent my bio to Thady, and she wasn't able to get it to Helen. So I'm going to take a moment and figure this out. I had everything ready to go for the series itself, but not actually the bio. So I'm going to grab that for a moment. And then I just want to say what brought each of you here? Does anybody want to share one sentence of like what brought you here and what your curiosities were to participate in this particular webinar? I've seen some of your faces on other webinars. I typically have a hot, messy bun because I've been just moving during this thing, so I haven't had my video on. But yeah, if we want to take a mindful moment and just kind of say hello to one another, I think the biggest part of this is building community. So we'll start with Hillary. I have you in my left far corner. What brought you to this webinar?
Oh, I just liked the, am I unmuted? Okay.
Yes.
I just liked the topic that, of mindful children, and, you know, so I was interested in the workshop aspect of it right now, because I'm not working a lot. It's a really good time to do these workshops.
The International Nanny Association.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Hillary, for sharing that. And then what about you, Sherry?
So for me, I mean, the topic is definitely something really interesting for me. I'm actually about to transition back into being a nanny. I nannied when I was in my early 20s, and I have been working in preschool childcare programs for the last 18 years, and find myself at a point where I am still working full-time for my preschool through the end of May, but they're letting me go after that. And when I was job searching, of course, I looked at preschools as well. But I ended up working with a nanny agency and getting a family, and I'm going to start with them in June. And so I joined INA pretty immediately, and this is actually my first webinar with you guys.
Ah, well, wonderful. Welcome. That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Sherry. How about you, Jessica?
So, I mean, I've just been practicing mindfulness on my own, and I see so many great results. And I started sharing some of my practices with the girls that I've been caring for primarily, and they've been showing so much interest. So I got this email this morning. I'm like, wait, that's a sign. Sign me up.
I love that. Awesome. How about you, Lindsay?
It's funny, Sherry and I have very similar paths here. I also was a nanny after college in my early 20s, and I've been a classroom teacher for the last 20 years. Older students though, 5th through 12th grade. And I decided to retire from classroom teaching after this school year. So I'm working my way back into the nanny world. So with this tight job market, I'm just open to everything that could improve my employability. And I know mindfulness and growth mindset are both big topics in the school-based education setting right now. So I have some familiarity with it already, but I love, or I would love to see how that transfers over to being a nanny.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And then Jacqueline, if you'd like to, you can feel free to chime in. I'll take a moment and wait for that. I can't see, for those I can't see your video, no problem at all. And if you don't want to chime in, I'll take one moment and then we'll just kind of move on to the next person. All right, how about you, Lisa?
Unmute myself. I am here because I also try to practice mindfulness. I want to hear more about it, and because I'm taking this downtime to just soak in everything I can so that I am ready to roll when we kind of open back up again.
Wonderful, awesome. And Brooke, I'm just going to invite you as well. I can't see you, but just so the invitation is out there, you're welcome to share why you joined this webinar today. Okay.
I'm here. Sorry, I had to unmute it. I'm currently with my nanny family today.
No worries.
So I practice mindfulness on my own as well. And I wanted to figure out if there were more ways to implement it with the families that I help, and, you know, see how it resonates with the kids too.
Wonderful. I love that. Thank you. And thanks for joining today too.
Thank you.
And then how about you, Krista?
Hi. Yeah, I just similar to everybody else. Just loving to hear how to incorporate mindfulness. And I loved the teachers that you study with, Sharon, and I've studied and practiced mindfulness myself. So I love to hear how you incorporate it with children.
Wonderful. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, and Cindy? Oh, so just
sorry, I was muted. Yeah, so I've been a nanny for about 40 years, and I just, you know, like Lisa, I'm home, not working right now, and just trying to take advantage of every, you know, webinar, what, you know, Zoom meeting, that I can to continue learning, you know, and being a forever learner, you know, I'm really looking forward to, you know, what I can gain from this, you know, today. So really excited.
Ah, wonderful. Thank you. And I believe Annie, how about you?
Hey, so basically I'm a huge nerd and
Yes.
I love learning. So, but I mean, who has the time to read? No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm a huge reader, big dork. Yeah, but
love it. I love it.
I guess I haven't studied mindfulness very much, and just hoping to learn more. And again, like she said, just you know, thankfully have this time to buff up my knowledge on, you know, everything, and just hopefully be a better person and better nanny, better wife. So.
Oh, I love that.
And I follow you on Instagram. You're awesome.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's awesome. That's so nice. Wonderful. I know I started Instagram like 2.5, 3 years ago, and it's super uncomfortable for me, but thank you so much for following, because I'm really trying to get more comfortable with being in front of the camera. So this is my first presentation. So thank you all so much for joining me today. This is something I'm very, very passionate about. And let's just kind of dive in. Think of it. That sounds good for you. So I'm going to take a moment to figure out how to share my screen. And then I'll probably just ask you if you guys can see this. So can you guys all see that right there? Let's see here. Okay, can everybody see it? If you can see it, can you put your thumbs up? Awesome. And can everybody hear me too?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So things I've been learning, right, as we teach virtually in our classes. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Right? Some of these silly things that we have to do. Okay. So I just want to say thank you so much to Helen, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. Also a big thank you to the International Nanny Association for creating a series that supports nannies, especially during this unprecedented time in history. As a fellow nanny with over 20 years experience, there's nothing better than sharing a piece and space with others who really understand our work, who really get it. And I'm also so happy to be here with each and every one of you today. So thank you for sharing while you joined today. I super appreciate you. And if you need to leave this series early, no worries at all. This will be recorded and uploaded onto YouTube, okay? I don't expect that we'll take the full 60 minutes, but I do want to be able to take any questions we can at the very end. Does that sound good? Okay, awesome. So during this webinar today, I'll give you a brief overview of mindfulness. We'll learn what mindfulness is and what it is not, and then we'll learn how becoming a mindful nanny can help us thrive in our careers. In this series, we learn about why practicing mindful tools helps us in not only our personal, but our professional lives. And for those that already practice that, you already see the benefits, and we already spoke to that as well. So in this series, we'll learn why practicing mindful tools helps us, and then also discuss why our supporting roles as nannies matter, and how mindfulness can be the gateway to supporting children's social and emotional needs and modeling these positive behaviors to further connect and improve the lives of the families we serve. So I'll just give you a moment here. I'm gonna scroll down here. I've already shared my screen with you guys. And you guys can just see this the Mindful Nanny initial page, yeah? Okay, cool. So I just want to explain that we are going to have, this is our first of 3 series. Mindfulness is a very broad topic, and I have to define that for a lot of people. And so I want to make sure that I'm taking the opportunity to break this down in a series that's accessible for everybody. So we've got our series today, what does it mean to be a mindful nanny? Our series next Thursday on May 7th, how to embody the mindful nanny role. And then on Thursday, May 14th, how to bring mindfulness into your family's lives. Of course, I'll sprinkle out tools in between, and you're always welcome to reach out to me after this or follow me on Instagram, the Mindful Care Collective and the Mindful Nanny Collective. That'll all be shown at the very end. So let's kind of dive into it. What is mindfulness? And I think that in order to incorporate, like really speak to this, I think a mindful movement is exactly what it sounds like. It's a mindful moment we give ourselves that allows us to ground into ourselves, to disconnect from the thoughts and the stress and focus on our attention on something important. So before we dive in, I want to acknowledge that we all came from a different place before we got on this call. So perhaps for some of us, you're still working, and then perhaps we came from another meeting or running errands or doing some other important task outside of this webinar. So I want to take a mindful moment to recognize this. So I'm going to invite us all into a mindful transitional moment. So let's take a moment to ground in. And if you're sitting or you're standing, let's simply take 1 minute, 60 seconds total to transition into our focus and our attention into this new space of learning. There's some basic ways we can greet transition. To focus on something basic like feeling the ground beneath our feet. And if it feels safe and comfortable, go ahead and rest your eyes for a moment. And think to yourself for 3 full breaths. I am breathing in and I am breathing out. I am breathing in through my nose, expanding my belly, and I'm breathing out to allow the belly to settle back in towards the spine. And let's take one final, the deepest breath yet in, and then exhale to let all the air out of your body. Awesome. We just finished our first mindful transition. It's simple as that, nothing complicated. So why do we do this? Taking a quick moment to disconnect from our regular everyday thoughts and focusing on our attention on something simple helps us to relieve stress and break out the thought patterns that sometimes can be very unhealthy. The most important reason to take these mindful moments is that this behavior we can model for children we care for, teaching them the importance of stillness and calm, and more importantly, showing them how to regulate their emotions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So in our next series on May 7th, we'll learn a little bit about about this tool and how we can set children up for success through mindfulness transitions, or mindful transitions as I like to call them. So thank you for embodying with that with me just now for those who chose to participate. I think we can all agree as nannies, we wear many different hats and we're constantly on the go, moving from one thing to the next, and we rush into many different moments in our day. So as I noted before, the way we show up in these moments is the behavior we model to the ones we care for. How often do we take just a few breaths before we transition? In fact, when was the last time you took 10 minutes to sit in silence without your phone or without reaching for the next thing we feel we need to tend to? Which as caregivers, we all feel we need to tend to something, right? It's innately in us. It's a beautiful gift. But according to Harvard Medical School, engaging in just 10 minutes of downtime by yourself in the quiet can help reduce stress, rebalance the mind, and restore energy. So as I said in our next session, we'll discuss this and the tools in greater detail. So what is mindfulness? So if you Google mindfulness, you find definitions and quotes from some of the most respected leaders in neuroscience, behavioral health, and education of our time. So educators such as John Kabat Zinn, Dr. Dan Siegel, Dr. Patricia Jennings. For those who have heard those, just raise your hands. I've heard those all, right? We've read their books. Yeah, awesome, Jessica. So mindfulness was formally introduced as a medical intervention in 1979. So when John Kabat Zinn started this program of mindfulness-based stress reduction at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center, since then, hundreds of medical centers, hospitals, and clinics from around the world have adopted the mindfulness tool to reduce pain and stress in patients. So I know this is a lot of information that I'm going to throw at you, so I really, really ask you to try to put on your mindful listening ears. And this is something that we can even engage with our children in and ask them, right? So right now, Auntie Alexaraye needs you to put your mindful listening ears on. Can you show me your mindful listening ears? And then maybe everybody right now, let's embody this, right? Yeah, it's not hard. And for them, they'll use it back towards you later, I promise you. And it's amazing. I love it. It's a constant reminder. And I love when they do that with their parents too. So now mindfulness is being introduced into schools around the world. Leaders in education have taken mindfulness studies from Harvard, UC Berkeley, UMASS, and many others to work to create programs that will help our next generation thrive. I love that so much. That makes me so happy. I want to talk about like the biggest misconception of mindfulness is that while it looks and appears on the outside like it's meditation, the two are not the same. Meditation is often seen as a religious practice, and while it's originated in that form, it is applied in many secular forms today. Mindfulness simply pulls pieces from that meditative practices, including breath work and mental focus, to support being intentional about your day-to-day moments. So when you increase calm, concentration, and emotional, and see there, even as I chose to be intentional with my words, rather than getting caught up in the humanity of feeling that I'm giving this presentation, right? That I might mess up on my next words. That once I begin to put that mindfulness piece inside me, I slow down a little bit. I'm really more involved and more engaged as a whole. And you can feel that whether it's virtually or you can feel that really in person. Would you agree? I agree. Thank you. So making that space, holding that space for yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, and the ways our body speak to you, or making space for your worries somewhere else other than, I don't know about you, but it's for me, it's in bed at night. That's when I worry. Did I do the best I could do today as a nanny, as a partner, as a community member? Mindfulness is inclusive of all beings, no matter your background, ethnicity, or religious beliefs. And in fact, science says that for people who are diagnosed with autism and ADHD, after an 8-week program, their work or school studies performance greatly increased by 11%, with awareness that their focus and overall well-being are greatly improved. It's also improved for those around them, especially for the family members and caregivers who also attended their own 8-week mindfulness training. I watched a powerful mini documentary, and I really encourage you all to do this. It's on mindfulschools.com, and they have a lot of different videos on there and different documentaries, a lot of wonderful content that I'll be bringing and cycling in through this, and also many of my other slides. I watched a powerful mini documentary on there that brought me to tears, and I slowly began to watch every documentary that they had on their website, and I really encourage you to visit this. A teacher came into Marina School in San Francisco. It was a middle school, one of the documentaries was this. She came into Marina Middle School in San Francisco. It's a middle school that had the most amount of students sent to detention in the whole district, and performed an 8-week mindfulness study. Now, as a teacher, as a children's yoga teacher and an adult yoga teacher and mindfulness instructor, when I go in, I often am faced with a child that has ADHD. I'm often faced with a community of teachers that have been frustrated throughout that preschool day or middle school day. And while I understand that as a nanny and as a teacher and as an instructor, when I come into these spaces, we can't just require our children to be calm and to be still right away. They're coming from somewhere else. And I knowingly know that some of these schools are not practicing these mindful transitions. So if we as nannies can start to incorporate that in our own bodies, and mindfulness is all about embodying the practice yourself, because then you realize how important this practice is. And then you really start to implement this with your children, because you remember that feeling and that sensation inside yourself that you've greeted yourself, right? For those who have practiced that, it's so amazing. So the results were certainly noticed after this 8-week mindfulness study. So after the course, 80% of the 7th graders calmed down more easily when they were upset. 58% focused better in class. 40% used it to avoid arguments or fights. 34% said it raised their grades, and 86% said more kids should learn mindfulness. And I love when kids speak to us and they tell us what we need to hear. It is so powerful. It made my heart shine. So similar results were also found in a survey of nearly 1,000 students who learned mindfulness at 8 other schools. And a lot of this science just got published. It was really fun for me to recreate some of these slides because a lot of this stuff just finalized their 10 and 20-year studies this last April 2020. What a great time, right, in history for us to be able to connect with that. So when you're being actively mindful and you're noticing and you're paying attention to your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors and movements of your body, and also to the effects that you have those of you around you. So if someone was distracting us here on this virtual platform, or we could feel their pain, we might be distracted in our own humanity, right? But just the physical act of us holding the space for one another on something that's so important to each and every one of us and really actively engaging improves our own concentration. It gets us excited about building a community that supports children and us as adults. So I think we can all agree that we need help and we need more tools and community that supports this. So when you're being actively mindful, you're noticing these little moments, right? So Harvard Medical School's publishing reports said stress-related healthcare problems are responsible for up to 80% of visits to the doctor and account for the third of the highest healthcare expenditures, behind only heart disease and cancer. But as few as 3% of these doctors actually talk to patients about how to reduce stress. So I really believe it's our responsibility to not only embody this to take care of ourselves as caregivers of children, helping raise other children, correct, right? But it's also really important that we start to search out and understand how we can embody this, but then model this behavior. So it can be difficult for the human mind to stay in the present moment. In fact, a recent study at Harvard found that people spend, and I can't believe this, but it's so real, like if we really think about our own humanity, people spend 46.9% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're doing. And so for those, I think we could all be honest, we might have already done it here. I physically know that I've done it while I'm presenting here. My mind went somewhere else to a different emotion, right? Possibly those emotions might be an insecurity being on camera, or those emotions could be, wow, I just messed up and I completely missed that sentence I really wanted to give. It's so interesting where we can go. But the moment that the mindful moments are so beautiful when we can gently escort ourselves back to the moment, right? And we want to remind children that they can gently begin again. So this kind of mindlessness is the norm. And as the mind spends its time focused on the past in regret mode, or the future in worry mode, and trying out should haves and what ifs, the study also found that allowing the brain to run on autopilot like this can make people really unhappy. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind, the researchers say. So I'm gonna spend a little bit of time, and I wish I could have made my face a little smaller, I'll be honest with you, but I could not figure out how to do it. But I'm gonna spend a little time talking about me. And I've been caring for children, just so you have a background, a contextual background, so since we weren't able to give that bio in the beginning. So I've been caring for children for over 20 years. I've also practiced as a labor, birth, and postpartum doula. I have worked with amazing unicorn families that I've worked with for many years, and often been asked to come back or to move with them. And like any good career nanny, I've worked with some not so great employers. So while recognizing my part in the partnership, a personal lack of boundaries and a lack of embodied self-care practice that really led to the infamous nanny burnout, I sought after how I could change. It was my responsibility. How I could show up differently, recognizing that growing in a career where we help others grow, we must also be embodying the interpersonal growth as well. Can we all agree on that? I believe it's imperative that we always seek out the best science and community that support the growing minds and bodies of the children, no matter your ethnicity, background, or religious faith. So I've dedicated the last 3 years of studying, practicing, and choosing to stick with working with the most challenging nanny family yet that my career has faced. I'll just breathe into that moment for reflection. So while also immersing myself in an embodied practice of mindfulness, and I will constantly be a student and constantly be a beginner again as I continue to study and grow through my instructor and my teacher role. So now as I look back, I see my newfound boundaries, my patience, my time, my grace, and embodied practice of physical exercise through yoga and mindfulness have drastically changed my entire career, but also how I show up in the lives of children and families I care for. So I have a wonderful opportunity to work at Nike as an adult and children's yoga mindfulness instructor. I also work at various preschools and private homes as well. And I coach nannies, I run support groups. I'll get into some of that a little bit later and some of the resources that you're able to connect with. Let's move on to our next slide. And everybody can still see these, yeah? A thumbs up if you can. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your help in that. So it can be a lot to just sit and listen to somebody else. So let's take a mindful moment before we transition into how our jobs can be enhanced as a mindful nanny. So I invite you to reflect and seat. Just bring some awareness of where you are in time and take a slow and steady breath in your nose and then back out through your nose. And then just follow the natural breath cycle. Now go back to consider becoming a nanny, or like Sherry and so many others, jumping back into it, or a teacher and a nanny. Why did you do it? Think about now a young person you care for. Take a few deep breaths for this young person. Chances are that when you really think about the children you care for, you have a strong wish and desire to support this individual. What you hope for them is happiness, well-being, and to live with a sense of ease in the realistic world we live in. And honestly, to thrive in moments such as these, COVID-19, where we're faced to cohabitate closely with our family members, look deeply within our moments together as families, and see how important all of our roles are as community members and family members. I believe we're all here today with International Nanny Association because we have a calling to care for children and youth. I certainly know that I have a lifelong calling to support fellow nannies feel seen and feel connected in an industry that requires many hats, calls for fast thinking and high demanding constant energy outputting, employers management, and some very real heartfelt pain, especially for those who have suddenly lost their jobs during the pandemic that we're currently facing. I just want to take a moment to recognize you for those that have lost your jobs. I know how hard that can be to suddenly not see that family member or those children you helped care for. And my heart is with you, and I thoroughly understand. I had 12 hours notice before I no longer had my nanny job that I had been working with for about 3.5 years. And since then, it's been challenging, it's been hard. So my heart is with you, and if you need any support, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can find me again on Instagram, email, all as my website, and all that information will be here at the end. So I spent the last decade supporting families now and nannies and coaching on our next steps and how to really connect with their children. And in the last 3 years, I've studied and practiced curated mindfulness techniques with children I teach and care for as a nanny and now as a registered children's and adult yoga mindfulness instructor. So again, I work at Nike as well as various preschools and private homes, and more recently navigating and applying virtual teaching, which has been interesting. Helen and I talked a little bit about that earlier too. And I've created the Mindful Care Collective and the Mindful Nanny Collective. So venturing into the new world of nanny meets entrepreneur, taking one step every day towards teaching caregivers and children how to connect and authentically model how to effectively increase calmness, concentration, and emotional balance. So thank you for joining me for those that did participate in that mindful nanny moment. I think it's so important for some of us to get back to those moments, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, just to kind of remember the why of why we chose our job. So when we look at mindful nanny objectives, and we look at what we really wanted in our reflection of our jobs and why we chose it, Improving the lives, of course, of the children that we care for are at the forefront of our careers and our thought processes. I don't know about you, but it's always when I'm in the shower and I'm scrubbing my hair and I'm like, what could I do to make today better? How could I show up differently? How could I be more engaging today? And what I found a lot of solace in is that as I've been working with kids for the last 3 years, especially those that have ADHD or some that are on the spectrum, mindfulness has absolutely helped them. Within 10 weeks of working on our 10-week curriculum with them, it is a night and day difference. And when they continue in that program year after year after year, it gives back so much. It requires a lot of patience and grace and humanity, but it's some of those things that if I didn't embody those myself, I wouldn't be able to connect with the children I care for and I work with. So some of the objectives, if you don't meet them every day, that's okay. And I want to normalize that for everybody. If you're at least, science says, if you're hitting at least 1 to 3 of some of these objectives that I'll be talking about, that you're building a better human for community. You're helping with social and emotional skills to help this child thrive. So of course we can't do all of them every day, but if we can try our best, we absolutely will contribute to an overall better human for the community around us. So we're talking about, when I'm looking at this slide, we're looking at supporting families we work with as a whole, setting the tone in the household, supporting the social and emotional needs of children, setting foundational communication structures, teaching critical life skills, teaching mindful routines to support self-management, goal setting, and healthy decision-making skills, teaching and supporting healthy, regulated emotions and communication, and creating a home that supports a positive climate and community amongst siblings, parents, and self. It's a big task. And it's something that sometimes we can go into a home and create for others, work with and work for, but sometimes we're not even doing that in our own lives. And I completely fall short sometimes of my own self-care routines. I'm such a caretaker that I'll put somebody before me. And I think society has trained us to do that. And I think that it's time for us to change the game. And it requires a lot of work. It requires commitment. But honestly, my life has changed since I've done it. And I'll explain that later. Let's see here. So let's look at this next slide. So I kind of came up with this quote of how I describe mindfulness, because like I said earlier, when you Google mindfulness, it's going to be a million different quotes and explanations. But for me, this is what I've found in the last 3 years, and it's shape-shifted for me and what that looks like. Every time I have an opportunity to work with a child, it just brings me so much joy and I learn something from them. They end up, of course, always being my teacher. So often when people think about mindfulness, especially as teachers, we think it might be sitting still and being calm, but what it's really about is recognizing our experience. And the positive byproduct of our experience is feeling calm and being what I call still with the moment. Simply sitting or being with ourselves helps us achieve a greater sense of calm and clarity and awareness of life. So even just sitting here in this moment, and I just invite you to take another deep breath in and another deep breath out. And just feeling your body as a whole in this moment in time and space. And we do this time and time again, whether we're going for a walk or we're eating, or I'm gonna take a mindful moment and take a drink of water. Connecting with that water, you know, allowing the sensation of the water hitting my lip to provide me some sort of curiosity about what's going to happen next, or perhaps the taste of water. I happen to have a little bit of lemon in here, but if it was plain water, what could you imagine it would taste like? And so I'll talk about in our next series, guided imagery and how important that is. But that's a little simple version of guided imagery. And at the very end, I'll give you some exercises that you can choose one exercise to implement before our next series so that you can feel a sense of embodying that piece of mindfulness. So when we look at, I got this from this particular slide and the following one as well, the evidence-based research from Mindful Schools. I mentioned them earlier. They're an amazing nonprofit. Please go check them out, mindfulschools.com, and you can check out some of their videos and the science behind what they're doing, why they're doing it. It's pretty remarkable. If you care about kids as much as I do, again, like I said earlier, it'll bring you tears, but also a sense of joy about where our world is heading. And it gave me a lot of hope considering we're in the time that we're in. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about science. So again, I'm just gonna ask us to put our mindful listening ears on. It's a lot of information to absorb. I'm also really happy to connect with anybody after this if you have additional questions or you wanted to write down or find the resources for any of these things. Okay, so if I can bring you back to the statement I quoted earlier from Harvard Medical School's publishing reports, stress-related health problems are responsible for up to 80% of visits due to the doctor and account for that third highest care expenditures. So behind only heart disease and then cancer. So I would imagine as caretakers of children and families, we most certainly fit into this category, right? That's a lot. Let's be real. So I liked this. I found this research study on Harvard during Harvard Medical, and I actually found this a few years ago, and it was really neat to watch Dr. Stahl kind of transform through his evolution of his career. And I found this just recently. It was just published here in April. So when I had researched and I looked up Dr. Stahl again to see where he was at, he's now Chief of General Internal Medicine at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center. And his team of Harvard researchers studied a mind-body relaxation program offered through the Benson Henry Institute for Mind-Body Medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital. The 8-week program taught participants several different mind-body approaches, including yoga, mindfulness, cognitive behavioral skills, and positive psychology. The study volunteers participated in weekly sessions that practiced at home as well. The researchers found that people in the relaxation program used 43% fewer medical services than they did the previous year, saving an average of $2,360 per year in emergency room visits alone. And this means that such yoga and mindfulness programs could translate into healthcare savings of anywhere between $640 to as much as $25,500 per patient per year. That's a big number. I mean, the science, that's wild. I love this quote from Dr. Stahl himself that followed the facts in Harvard study because it speaks so much to who I am and why I love mindfulness and why I love it, because it's so inclusive of all beings from any background. So there are many ways to get to the well state, he says, many gates to wellness, but not every gate is open to every person. One of the strengths of the program is that it draws upon many different tools that reinforce each other and allow many gates to open to a wide array of people. I love that. Let's move on to our next slide. So I'll dive a little bit deeper into this on our second session, but I wanted to just touch base to kind of preliminarily, mindfully get you into the thought processes of the brain, which is really where we began in our original series here today, talking about the brain and then how our mindfulness can change, and it can change whether you caught that or not at any stage. So studies show that mindfulness develops our brain, even as adults, and we have the chance to change our brain function's response to stimulus. So with time and consistency, which we use all the time with kiddos, right? We can meet the changes we want to see in the world and within our adult selves. So our story isn't written for us. We can still change. We can still adapt. We can still mindfully and gently, moment by moment, change the things that we want to change. Right? And if we're caregivers of children, how important and valuable is that? It's incredibly, I mean, it's priceless, right? So this reminds me of the never truer quote that we all need to hear right now. Be the change you want to see in the world. So the next series on May 7th, we'll discuss how to embody the mindful nanny role. And I'll share my personal story on how at age 5, I knew I had to change my family's legacy, and that the responsibility was mine alone. I believe mindfulness has been my greatest tool yet towards my lifelong calling to complete this legacy changing in my family. But for now, let's talk about the brain just a little bit. As Dr. Dan Siegel says, just understanding these functions about the brain alone can change the way the brain responds to stimulus on a moment-to-moment basis. I think it's really important that we understand as much as we do about the brain, as much as we can, because then we can explain it to the ones we care for. So let's look at the slide right here. And we're gonna look at these little numbers that are right here. And you can find this particular image on Mindful Schools. The verbiage over here is my own verbiage because I really wanted to figure out how to explain this to you guys. So I'd love some feedback if you guys want to email me after this and let me know if you really understood this. It's kind of a big concept if you're initially new to it. And so I wanted to break it down, but we will dive deeper into this later. So if we look at image 1 right here, you see this? The pink number 1s. This is the amygdala. It's activated when detecting and reacting to emotions. So including difficult or strong emotions such as fear. So also thoughts, meaning logic, associations, and feelings about feelings. So when a 4th grader reports that she has felt she was going to die from the test anxiety, she's honestly telling her truth. The response of her autonomic nervous system are the same whether she's taking a math test or she's sensing actual physical danger. And it's powerful to allow the space to be held for children when they speak to us and they tell us their truth. Even if it doesn't seem close to our reality, it is their reality. And we need to put our mindful listening ears on and tune in, really. And really the way to do that is by embodying that own self-care practice yourself. So your bucket isn't empty. So you have the space and capacity to be there. So when an impulsive reaction is triggered by emotions like fear or anger, rises up from the amygdala, these number 1 sections here, and it can fly back right here. And the hippocampus, which are the most ancient parts of the brain, which is right here, number 2. Can everybody see that? These parts are evolved to respond with defensive action to threatening situations. So mindfulness practice, as you may have guessed, diminishes the reactivity from the amygdala and strengthens the prefrontal cortex, part of the brain. So if we can delay this reactivity by taking mindful moments, then the newer or the more modern developed brain, which is right here, the prefrontal cortex of the brain, can respond from a place of reflection and thoughtfulness. And that's also number 3 right here in the brain. And the way I describe this when I talk to toddlers about this, is I start talking about focus. So when I really want them to focus on something, I say, can you please use your focus part of your brain? And I use my 2 fingers because it draws attention to the top of my forehead. They really stop what they're doing. And I say, now can you show me your focus? And I start this at about almost 2 years old. And I really exercise it as much as I can all the way through 2 to normalize that conversation, because by 3 years old, I mean, it's amazing what they can do. They'll be telling you, similarly to the mindful breath, Auntie, can you find your focus? Or Mommy, Daddy, can you find your focus? Or they get excited to share their stories about how they found their focus. And nothing gives back better to me. I think it's just so amazing. And I think it's very important. So the PFC, again, this number 3 right here, the prefrontal cortex is associated with maturity, including regulating emotions and behaviors and making wise decisions. So we interact more and more now as a community than we have ever before. So this is exciting stuff, and it's also extremely needed. So we have learned to live together collectively. The human brain has been spurred to grow accordingly. So we no longer have to really function from this behind the scenes, I guess, like, what would you call that? Older part of your brain. This space that we're now developing a space that's a different brain that responds. So we can delay the reactivity and really show up to be our best if we practice this more and more and more. So the part of this reorganization process, says neurobiologist Dr. Arlene Montgomery, includes the pruning of disused neural connections. This growth and pruning are affected by environmental experiences and reshape the adolescent brain. So this is one of the reasons mindfulness in childhood and adolescence can be so effective. The pathways that foster empathy and impulse control are being used and strengthened, which will serve a child through his or her life. And that goes right back to some of our objectives as nannies, to really getting to that space. So all in all, mindful thinking happens when the prefrontal cortex can process the information. So if you'd like to gain more information about this, feel free to visit my website. I have a great video by Dr. Dan Siegel, a clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA School of Medicine, who I've mentioned before, but this video explains the different parts of the brain and how we can come to understand it. If you have more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email, themindfulcarecollective@gmail.com. And this is something that I'm putting together in my mindful nannying trainings that will roll out in August of this year. Until then, this is my invitation to reach out to me and join nannies and myself every other Sunday in community to support our roles as nanny. We meet virtually with other nannies and au pairs from around the world to discuss our roles and support the growing need to embody our own social and emotional skills so we can better serve the families that we care for. It is the most quality time I've spent, and I've never felt more seen or more heard when I connect with these other nannies and teachers and caregivers of children as a whole, daycare providers, babysitters. And these are people who really, really get it. So it is an exciting time. We do have our first session this next Sunday. You're welcome to join. If you'd like to, just follow me on Instagram, Mindful Care Collective or Mindful Nanny Collective. Drop me a DM and then I'll send you the link for that meeting, okay? So it's at 12 noon on Sunday, Pacific Standard Time. And a lot of the gals that I talk to are in the States are on the East Coast. So I'm sure some of you will find some good commonality there too for those that are. So when we look at mindfulness and how it helps the growing brain develop, it really helps us develop our executive functions. So with mindfulness, we can practice mindfulness anytime, anywhere, and with anyone by showing up and being fully engaged in the here and now. Mindfulness is the simple act of paying attention and noticing and being present in whatever you're doing. So when most people go about their daily lives, their minds wander from the actual activity they're participating in, and other thoughts or sensations come in that might have already happened, that likely did happen in this webinar series. So when you're mindful, you're actively involved in the activity with all of your senses instead of allowing your mind to wander. And I believe normalizing this is a fairly new for many of us, and that needs to be spoken to. This isn't something that should be curated over a period of time. I will continue myself to be an own student. But becoming a mindful nanny should be a part of our trainings, and it should be at the forefront of our understanding of working with children and supporting families through transitions of growth with their children. And we do a lot of that. We're often the person that sits there and spends time modeling this behavior for families, or we yield the questions and we build the bridges of communication between our children and the family members. So when we think about a mindful moment, we think about following your breath or counting to 10 when you're angry or sad, and it gives you time for the amygdala, just that we talked about, to allow the information to flow to the prefrontal cortex to be properly analyzed and be learned from what I call a safe space brain. And then it becomes embedded, that's also what I call, in the brain as a learned response to stimulus. So here's this is the way I look at a brain. Dr. Dan Siegel will look at it like this, but this is how I'm going to explain it. This is our amygdala. And we've got our logic part of our brain here. So when we get stressed or angry or upset, it flips back. And all the blood that we have here in our logic rushes to the back right here in fight or flight zone. And we have an opportunity to strengthen this prefrontal cortex and allowing the amygdala and the hippocampus, which stores our memories, to settle down and be nourished by constantly supporting things like yoga and mindfulness. And so some of these groups that I do, I hold community free classes for nannies in yoga. We do virtual classes or mindfulness. And building that community of strength and support around you is really what keeps us all anchored and embodying this new activity and keeping ourselves accountable. So let's move on to the next slide. We only have about 10 more minutes here. And being a nanny, right, or a teacher, we always want to give these mindful transition moments and even speak to us fellow adults. We have 10 minutes here, right? So we want to be mindful about the new transition. So I really want to pass along what I've learned through my own mindfulness practice and how it has changed the game in my career as a nanny. I want to help you dust off those cobwebs of experience that we get caught up in our own expertise. We start to bypass new information and help you to really tune in, to learn how to embody and model patience, grace, truth, and love in any moment. This has normalized my own humanity. And as a nanny with over 20 years experience, it's reshaped the way that I recognize my own emotional and logical needs while learning to appreciate, lay claim to, and hold space for the children that I care for, including the all too familiar times when your 3-year-old melts to the ground in a puddle of emotion, completely upset that they can't wear shorts in the middle of winter. I want to support nannies in their own mindfulness practices and self-care, helping you find community through virtual support groups, helping you gain the knowledge, resources, and training to embody the Mindful Nanny movement. Showing up moment by moment, meeting every bit of understanding for your children you care for, and more importantly, for yourself. My Mindful Nanny trainings will be rolling out in August, and I'd love to hear from you and from those that are interested, or you're welcome to share that with other fellow nannies, and you can take the training together, which would be really fun. So I love this quote here. Breathe in, I calm my body and mind. Breathe out, I smile, dwelling in the present moment. And I know this is the only moment. I love that. I think that's really neat. So in the meantime, before I see you for our next webinar, which I'm so looking forward to, and/or this Sunday for our virtual meetup, let's practice one of the following. And I encourage you to only pick one. I think it would be a little bit overwhelming if you're new to mindfulness to pick a handful of them. But the options are mindful eating. So just as I did with my water earlier, really tasting that, really taking a moment to absorb that sensation or the smell or the curiosity of why I was even craving what I was craving in the first place. So mindful eating can look like that. That could be one of your options. A body scans to me, when I teach initially, body scan can be a lot. It can be kind of overwhelming to really start. The idea is that you want to work your way up. So my suggestion is a hand scan or a toe scan, or looking at your partner and gazing at every one of their eyelashes from the right side and then the left, or your children. It's amazing what shows up in the body in those moments. And these are opportunities and invitations for you to get curious about that space of what mindfulness is and how you can incorporate it in your life. So there's also mindful transitions, which we practiced today. Also practice mindful breathing, mindful listening. So thank you so much, as I know it's a lot of information. And mindfulness for better sleep, and also just simply observing the ordinary. So go on a walk. I hope you are taking good care of yourself, getting outside. Take moments to gaze at the grass or gaze at a flower or something that brings you joy. So we'll dive deeper into each of those practices on May 7th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then when we speak about how to embody the Mindful Nanny role. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. And we've got about 5 more minutes. So thank you. So have a lot of our participants here. Oh, I love this. Okay, I saw some notes in here and I just want to make sure I review those notes so if there's anything that we need to do. Okay, Krista might have had to left. Looks like she had to leave early. Was the sound fading for everybody or were you guys okay?
At one specific part, I think it was like fading really bad for me, but it wasn't bad the whole entire time, just when I sent that message.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much, Jessica. I super appreciate you. Sorry, I hope that we were able to feedback. Okay. And then Krista, let's see here. Says, love that exercise. Mindfulness seems to encourage us to simply slow down, to be childlike in our curiosity. It's so interesting to bring this to children, almost like we are encouraging them to be more in their nature, to be more curious and childlike. Gosh, I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for providing this. Krista said, really great exercises. Wonderful. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to say thank you again to each and every one of you. And is there anything that I can do to address any questions you currently have? This is a good space to do so. Or feedback, because this is my first one.
No way, I would have never known it was your first one.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
It was awesome. It was awesome hearing from you. It was awesome getting to meet you, and I will be definitely emailing you.
Awesome.
I have a lot of things that you sparked off.
Oh, yay. I love that. And I hope you can join us too on the next session as well. So thank you.
Yes. I mean, you know, my schedule's just so tight.
Yes, yeah.
But I should be able to work something out.
I love that.
Yeah, but I really have been taking a moment to enjoy the flexibility of this time, because I mean, I'm personally feeling like I thrive being at home all the time, you know?
Yes.
Especially in this transition that, you know, I've been coming from nanny to now entrepreneur and balancing both. Well, finding mindfulness as a new practice. It just like you said, like the way you said it's a bit overwhelming. I felt the ocean. I'm like, yeah, I know it is a bit overwhelming.
Yes, it is.
But great job. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. This was awesome. This was actually one of my first seminars like that I actually, you know, sat through and participated in. So
Oh, I love that.
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, International Nanny Association. I just really want to say that. Thank you so much for creating this webinar series for everybody. This is so important. And like I said before, to have and see the community of fellow nannies. And then also, Jessica, thank you for sharing that story. It's that vulnerability piece of sharing our stories is super important. So thank you so much.
For sure.
Is there anything anybody else wanted to say? Okay, wonderful. All right, Helen.
Thank you, Alexaraye. Thank you. As Alexa said, the talks are recorded, so you will be able to find them on the YouTube channel. They will be uploaded by tomorrow, probably. But thank you all again for joining in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, you can follow me on Instagram, International Nanny Association. We'll be posting this on YouTube, but yeah, I'll share that screen here with my file. But in the meantime, thank you so much. So if you want to find my website or Instagram, I'll share my screen right now. But thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you.
Take care.
You too. Thank you. Oh, I apologize. Looks like my slide kind of overlapped a little bit there, but you should still be able to see the email there, and then also the Instagram options, as well as my website.
Bye.